Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Astrology of Crime. Thank you for showing up today, especially live. Nice to see everyone. Spirit and Matter. Great Talon. Regan. Nice to see you all. So, yeah, we're going to talk about the JonBenet Ramsey case, and maybe we'll be able to find some justice for JonBenet regarding this tragedy that took place back in 1996. Do let me know if I am falling off in terms of internet issues or anything like that. Nice to see you, everyday therapist. Hello, Lady Feline. So let's talk about this case. We're going to give a brief overview of the timeline of the Ramsey case, and we'll go into these issues more thoroughly as we go through the presentation. So on December 25th, 96, JonBenet Ramsey is reported missing from her Boulder, Colorado home. A ransom note demanding $118,000 is found. So we're going to talk more about that ransom note and the 911 call. On December 26, 96, JonBenet's body is discovered in the basement of her home. She'd been strangled and suffered a skull fracture. On December 27th, 96, police investigation into the murder begins, with the Ramsey family facing media attention and suspicion. In early 97, Boulder police treat John and Patsy Ramsey as possible suspects, leading to controversy. In April 97, a grand jury is convened to review the evidence, but the proceedings remain sealed. In August 2000, the grand jury is dismissed without any indictments being filed, leaving the case unsolved. So what's interesting about that is that later on, you had jurors that came forward of that grand jury and said, we said that we should indict the Ramseys, but they weren't indicted. The DA decided not to indict them, irrespective of what the grand jury offered and said should be done. So that's really interesting. We're going to get further into that and all the nonsense and corruption that is clearly evident in this case. In 97, oh yeah, okay, we spoke about that. In 2002, the Ramseys relocate to Georgia while maintaining their innocence and cooperating with authorities. In 2003, Patsy Ramsey passes away from ovarian cancer. For those of us who believe we create our own reality, and that means that we also create our diseases, etc., I think that is very, very relevant that she died from ovarian cancer. In 2006, a new district attorney takes over the case, asserting that an intruder was likely responsible for the murder, which is preposterous. If you study this case, the idea of an intruder doing this is ridiculous. In 2008, DNA evidence found at the crime scene is re-examined, ruling out the Ramsey family as matches. Really? How is that even possible? So at this crime scene, obviously the Ramsey's DNA would be there, right? And it's touch DNA that they decided to use to exonerate the Ramseys, not blood nor semen, but it was just touch DNA. So they exonerate the Ramseys when really that crime scene was completely contaminated throughout the whole day, right? Because we'll get further into this, but after Patsy called 911, she invited the whole world over, her house, her pastor, all of her friends. So, I mean, the crime scene was completely contaminated. And to say DNA evidence exonerates the Ramseys is outrageous. We'll get further into that. It was touch DNA, which is not even as important as the other DNA, right? Like semen or blood, stuff like that. In 2010, John Ramsey remarries. In 2016, CBS airs a documentary proposing that JonBenet's older brother, Burke, accidentally killed her, and the parents covered it up. Burke files a defamation lawsuit against CBS, which is later settled. Good for him. Good for that Aquarius. I don't think that he did it at all. I don't think that he was involved at all. I think he was just there. So it makes sense why he would have sued, because Aquarius's key phrase is "I know." It's like, I know I didn't do it. So you're going to allude to the fact that I did. I'm going to sue the pants off you, right? So good for Burke. 2018, the Boulder Police Department announces plans to employ new DNA testing techniques in hopes of resolving the case. And at present, the JonBenet Ramsey case officially remains unsolved. So, yeah, there we have it. This is our crime chart. So what I did is ran the crime chart for the time of the 911 call. And we're going to go over this, the different ways of looking at a crime chart too. In a crime chart, when we're dealing with children, usually children under 6 are ruled by the 5th house. JonBenet was 6. So we can look at the 5th house. It does make sense that she would be represented by the 5th. The 5th house in this chart is ruled by Taurus, and Taurus is Venus, right? Venus rules Taurus. So then we look at Venus and we say, okay, well, Venus is here in the 12th house, right? And the 12th house is the hidden house. It's stuff that's behind the scenes, hidden. And at the time of the 911 call, JonBenet's body was hidden in the basement. And if we notice that Venus, which rules the victim per the 5th house cusp, is next to Pluto. And Pluto has to do with trouble. Wherever you see Pluto, that's where there's trouble, there's darkness, there's secrets. And she was in the basement, which makes a lot of sense. Pluto also, it being so close to Venus in this crime chart, we need to examine that. Pluto rules underworld, gangs, mafia, plutocracies. So there's interesting stuff there for sure. So that Venus, which rules the victim, is in the 12th house, and it is in Sagittarius. Now, number one, Venus ruling the victim, Venus is very, very bright, right? It's very bright. Not as bright as the sun, but it's bright. And then we have Sagittarius, right? We got Sagittarius, Venus in Sagittarius. Now, Sagittarius is all about broadcast, news, information. So we could see here, with Venus being the ruler of her chart and it being in Sagittarius and the rising sign, which also can refer to our victim being Sagittarius, that there may have been some news or something that was seen or said or something that she was about to broadcast potentially. And we're going to go into this working theory a little bit more as well. So if we use the ascendant as the victim, as we usually do in a crime chart, except when, it's a child, we have the ascendant in Sagittarius. And then you look at Sagittarius and you say, okay, who rules Sagittarius? What rules Sagittarius? Jupiter rules Sagittarius. And Jupiter is placed in the 2nd house in Capricorn, right? And it's among all of these other planets. So you got Jupiter here, and then you got Mercury, which we're going to talk more about that. Mercury rules our perpetrator. But it's beside Mercury, it's beside Neptune, and it's beside Uranus. So you got our victim here around 3 other people or 3 other energies. Okay? So when we're looking at the 1st house, say we're going with that our 1st house is our victim. So the ascendant in Sagittarius, that's JonBenet. And the 1st house is usually what the victim is seeing around her at the time of the crime. And you got the sun there, which not only co-rules our perpetrator, but it's usually a man 40 to 50 years old. So that is what, if we're using the ascendant as our victim, that is what she was seeing around her at the time of her murder. What's also interesting, for those who know the case, they found in the autopsy, bits of undigested pieces of pineapple. 18 pieces of pineapple were in the bowl that was found on Ramsey's table. And pineapple, if she ate pineapple, because that's what was found in her stomach, it's just interesting because pineapple is ruled by the sun, according to Scott Cunningham. So we got the sun in the victim's body, right? We have pineapple, which is ruled by the sun. So I think that was fascinating. Additionally, when you're looking at a crime chart, you want to look at the 7th house to see who the perpetrator is. Now, in this crime chart, we have Gemini on the 7th house cusp. So Gemini is two perpetrators. And when we're looking at Gemini, who is Gemini, right? When we're talking about archetypic Gemini roles, it's a lot. You got siblings that rule Gemini. You got neighbors that rule Gemini, salesmen, journalists, teachers. So it's a lot. A lot of possibilities there with the Gemini on the 7th house cusp. But we look further and we say, okay, well, Gemini is 2, sure. And it's ruled by Mercury. Where's Mercury in this chart? Mercury is retrograde in Capricorn. So 18 degrees Capricorn, retrograde Mercury. Mercury retrograde at 18 degrees Cap. So that is our perpetrator. Our 18-degree Capricorn Mercury retrograde is our perpetrator. So we also have in this chart that Mercury, our perpetrator, is among a cluster of other planets, one of which is Jupiter, which rules our victim, per the ascendant as the victim, but also Neptune and Uranus. So we have a stellium, which is 3 or more planets in the 2nd house of money. So when we're looking at a crime chart and you're seeing these stelliums are a lot of energy that's packed into one house, well, that's a sign. That means something. There's a reason why there are 4 planets, including the ruler of our perpetrator and the ruler of our victim, in the 2nd house. So money is an issue here. Money is pertaining to this crime in some way. Not only that, but 3 out of 4 of these planets that are in that 2nd house are in the sign of Capricorn. So Capricorn is here. Also, that Mercury, which rules our perpetrator, incidentally, is retrograde. And that could pertain to some backwards thinking in regard to status or attaining status because it's Capricorn. Now, we got a stellium in the 2nd house, including the ruler of our victim and the ruler of our perpetrator. And 3 of these planets are in the sign of Capricorn. And Capricorn is the sign of patriarchy. It rules governments, big business, old school masculinity, and hierarchies. So that is relevant to this case, which would make a lot of sense since we had a DA make a public apology to the Ramseys, which is absolutely outrageous. Not only did they exonerate him, they apologized. Okay, anyway. Something's rotting in Denmark, folks. Something is rotting in Denmark. So we also have money involved here, of course, and those energies are really, really interesting. With all that Capricorn energy, you know, at this point we have an idea of what energies are relevant to this case. So why not look at who is in that household? Well, let's look. We got the Ramseys here. John Ramsey, Sagittarius. Patsy Ramsey was a Capricorn. A lot of Capricorn in that chart, and we do have a lot of Sagittarius in that chart. And we got Aquarius, Burke. And Aquarius we have here with Uranus, right? And then we have JonBenet, and she's a Leo. We got no Leo in this chart. We got Sagittarius over here. We got a lot of Capricorn, We even got Aquarius, but we're missing the sun. We're missing Leo, right? So what does this mean on a big picture level? If we're missing the sun in the forensic chart, then, and other people are accounted for, well, in this crime, they were probably trying to diffuse or extinguish the sun. The sun being light, illumination, knowledge, consciousness, awareness, right? So most likely in this case, they were trying to keep things in the dark, right? Which makes a lot of sense with Pluto, darkness in that 12th house next to one of the real rulers of the victim, Venus, right? And during the time she was found, so around the time that she was murdered, the transiting sun was conjunct JonBenet's Uranus. So this is interesting. The sun conjunct Uranus can mean a lot of different things. It's an increased desire for freedom and independence. So if JonBenet was made to do certain things that she didn't want to do, she may have put up a fight. There's also a tendency to break free from routine. They say 4 experts believe that not only was JonBenet sexually assaulted at the time of her murder, but 4 experts agree that this sexual abuse was chronic, ongoing. This wasn't a one-shot deal. And some reason, this detail gets swept under the rug. Very few people are going to talk about this for some reason, but it's been asserted by four experts that she had suffered chronic abuse, which you can tell, or they could tell with the autopsy, and they were looking at her nether regions. They found that there was evidence of chronic abuse. Hey, Grandma Nay, meant to be on time. Oh, you're dyeing your purple? That's really cool. You can start over if you want, or you can just catch the replay. Maybe stick around so you can stick around for the discussion. So, additionally, she may have been trying to break free from routine. Since the autopsy report clearly states that she most likely had been sexually assaulted prior to the murder, this could have been a tendency to want to break free from any routines, because in sexual abuse cases, it's usually on a regular. It's a regular pattern of behavior. It happens consistently. Also, that sun hitting her Uranus could also be about unexpected events or sudden insights. It could be significant life changes, and it also could be the experience of sudden awareness or shock. She could have been made aware of something. So there's a lot of things here with that sun hitting Uranus. But when the sun hits Uranus for a Leo, that's going to make them very, very sunny and very, very knowledgeable and probably vocal, right? Probably very, very vocal. So also, if we're using the first house cusp as our victim and it's ruled by Sagittarius, well, Sagittarians are known for their big mouths, right? They have big teeth even. That doesn't mean that all Sagittarians have big mouths. I know quite a few Sagittarians and they're actually quite quiet. So you have to look at the whole chart, but archetypically, Sag is all about being frank and direct and loud and very, very vocal, right? It rules publishing and broadcast. It tells stories. Sagittarius is the storyteller. So if that's the case, then again, it's very possible that she was murdered because they needed her to keep quiet about something. Now, when we're looking at a crime chart too, the moon is also the co-ruler of the victim. So the moon co-rules the victim, and the moon in this chart is in Cancer at 23 degrees, and look at what it's being opposed by. that moon that co-rules the victim is being opposed by Jupiter. Jupiter in Capricorn at 23. So Jupiter is huge. It's really, 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 really big, right? And the moon is very, very vulnerable. So let's look at our Ramseys again. Who's ruled by Jupiter here? Yup, John Ramsey. Sagittarius, he's Jupiter ruled. So that's interesting. Additionally, outside of that, what is opposing JonBenet if it's not an actual person? Well, we got Jupiter in this chart, and it's conjunct Neptune. So Neptune pertains to delusion, deception, cinema, denial, drugs, alcohol, lies, confusion. Neptune obfuscates things. Now, Jupiter is the biggest planet, and it makes big whatever it touches. So with Jupiter conjuncting Neptune, this might be large scale or expansive deception, delusion, denial, stuff like that. I would say if it's large scale, it's not large scale denial. It could be large scale deception by a large entity of some kind. Now that makes further sense when we look at the North Node in this chart. So you got Jupiter, which is huge, conjuncting Neptune, which suggests that this crime goes way beyond the Ramsey household, particularly when you got the North Node in this chart in the 9th house, which has to do with vastness, right? Things going beyond the Ramsey house in Boulder, Colorado, something that's bigger, that's vast, that might even pertain to anything foreign as well. Now that 9th house is really, really interesting. Let's just look there because you got the North Node in the 9th, and the North Node represents underlying karma that's being played out in the context of the crime. So it also pertains to deeper motivations or forces at play. So that North Node is important, and it's in the 9th house. So the 9th house, if we delineate, for people, it could be foreigners, it could be teachers, it could be philosophers, it could be diviners, it could be priests, and it could be judges. And just a sidebar here, one of the very first people Patsy Ramsey called over to the household was her pastor, who was recently passed, who went on record saying the Ramseys didn't do this. But I think that's interesting that the 9th house is here, which does rule priests. If we're talking about places, the 9th house can rule foreign countries, colleges, churches, or institutions. Okay? We got two things going on here in terms of places that I think are relevant to this case. One, we have churches. Patsy was very, very, very religious, especially when she first discovered cancer. I think that she turned to Jesus, got very, very religious. Also, when we're talking about the 9th house, we're also talking about institutions. And what do we know JonBenet from? But it's from her pageants, right? So that's an institution. Those pageants are part of a larger group, an institution. So just keep that in mind. It's very, very possible. Very, very possible. We're going to get more into the theories. I never actually thought of it in that term, trafficked, but very, very possible. And we're talking about things in terms of that 9th house. Again, that 9th house is very relevant. It's where our North Node is. Religion, law, education, long journeys, quests, higher education, publishing, and ideology. I would look at this as religion, right? Religion, perhaps. And it also, again, it's ideology. People who, have the same mores, right? Like pageants, perhaps. So it seems like it was really impossible for that to happen, since there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever of a break-in. originally they saw that this window had been broken, but then John said that he broke the window himself when he had locked himself out at one point. And also we had cobwebs on the windowsill. None of them were disturbed, right? Spiders, cobwebs. So no, I don't think. So yeah, we have a lot going on here, but that 9th house is key. That 9th house is key. Now Mars describes the nature of the crime. And since this chart is for the 911 call, it describes that, right? So Mars here is at 27 degrees. Again, that 18 keeps popping up. 18 chunks in the pineapple, of pineapple in that bowl. 18 degrees is our perpetrator. 18 degrees Capricorn, Mercury, right? And then we also have the cross sum, of course, of 18 is 9. And then you get Mars, our perpetrator, co-ruling the perpetrator, but also describes the nature of the crimes at 27. 2 plus 7 is 9. 1 plus 8 is 9. So it's really interesting. There is this very Virgoan flavor to this chart that we can look further into because I ran the charts for all of the Ramseys. And somebody has a Virgo rising, meaning that their approach is very Virgo. Isn't that fascinating? But anyway, when we're talking about Mars, we're also talking about the nature of the crime, and that would indicate planning, meticulousness, and perfectionism, particularly with perhaps this 911 call that we're going to go over. So then Mars is also really close to that north node. I mean, it's a little wide, but not much. So that suggests that police, Mars can be police, especially men. Mars is men. It suggests that they could have played a substantial role in this crime, which really would make sense. And again, I don't think it was all police. I think that you had, believe it or not, a small faction of police that were trying to do something to prevent this from being realized, like the truth being realized, right? Because, well, a lot of stuff happened. The lady who was there in the beginning, who showed up to the Ramsey's house, I think that she was almost like set up, like, oh yeah, why don't you go? You know what I mean? Maybe she was inexperienced and they wanted her there because they needed somebody there, but they also wanted to keep things intact, right? So we're going to get further into that. What's also really interesting is the 10th house cusp rules the police and authority hierarchies, okay? And that's in Libra. And where Venus rules Libra, and where is Venus? It's in the 12th house right next to Pluto. So that's really interesting. So the 12th house has to do with hidden secrets, things that are behind the scenes, stuff that nobody knows about that's really relevant to the matter. And police, we have here, the ruler of the police is in the 12th house next to Pluto, which might suggest why this case was so mishandled. For instance, the police there, they have John Ramsey and his friend search the house. Why wouldn't the police search the house? Why, right? Fascinating. Additionally, when we have our public perception of the crime, we can see that actually in the 10th house, right? How the world perceives the crime. And that there we have Chiron. We have Chiron, and it's in Libra, and it's at the very last degree of Libra at 29 degrees. So the global trauma associated with this crime and how the public perceived it, at least on a subconscious level, pertains to partnerships. You got Chiron, which is woundedness, and Libra, which is partnership, which is really, really fascinating. Because when we look at Patsy Ramsey's chart, she has a ton of planets in her 7th house of partnerships, including her chart ruler, which is Venus, because she's a Taurus rising. So it's interesting that the public perception, at least on a subconscious level of this crime, has to do with pain in partnerships, and woundedness in partnerships. And Patsy Ramsey has a packed 7th house cusp. Very possible. Very possible. There's definitely, I believe, through what we've seen so far, this goes beyond Boulder, Colorado, for sure. So then over here, we have our body, right? So during the time of the call, we now know that the body was in the basement. And that Saturn, which represents the body, is pretty close to the 4th house cusp. It's in the 3rd. But more importantly, it's making a trine to Venus. So it's like it's well obscured, right? It's making a trine to Pluto. It is to Venus as well, but it's a tighter orb with Pluto, because Pluto is at 4 degrees Sag and Saturn is at 1 degrees Aries. So there's a nice flow of energy for our perpetrator in that the body is well hidden, right? Because it's making that harmonious trine to the 12th house, which is hidden. So let's just go over some of the evidence here that we actually have that could back up our findings. In the 911 call, it was really interesting. Patsy is all over the place. We have a kidnapping is one of the things she says. Hurry, please. We have a kidnapping. So we have a kidnapping is distancing language, right? We have a kidnapping. Could be a matter. Tell them we have a kidnapping. What have you. We have a kidnapping. So we have that being distancing language, right? And she's not really being clear in this. We have there's a note left and our daughter is gone. I understand that she's under extremis. I get that. But I'm sorry. If we look at Patsy Ramsey's chart, this woman had a Taurus rising. She was a Capricorn and a Sagittarius moon. If you have an emergency, you want somebody with this chart to call 911 because they have the detachment of the Taurus rising. They're a Capricorn, so they're used to cleaning up shit and getting things done. And you have the Sagittarius moon, which gives you a certain big picture perspective. I need somebody here right now. We got a note saying my daughter's been kidnapped. Get here quick, straight away, right? It's going to be very, very, very clear, right? With this chart anyway. But there's other things with the call that is very, very off. Besides the fact that she is all over the place and not being really clear. It says SBTC victory. We'll get more into that. And she also says in the call, I am the mother, not I am her mother. I am the mother. And she also says in the call, we just got up and she's not here. I always look at that. Just got up. Like she wants to make really, really clear that they just got up. We just got up now. Now, keep in mind this fact as well. Patsy Ramsey, Capricorn #1, Taurus rising, okay, a socialite, very high status individual. And she was wearing, when the police come to the house the next morning, the same clothes that she had worn at the Christmas party the night before. The same clothes. So she says that when she was asked about this, that she just did. She put the same clothes on from the night before. A woman of her money and status, especially, forget even how much money she has, but a woman of her stature isn't going to wear the same clothes twice in a row, let alone on Christmas or the day after Christmas. That's just doesn't make any sense. So she was wearing the same clothes because she didn't go to sleep that night, right? Why would you wear the same clothes from the night before if you're Patsy Ramsey? Taurus rising, which is all about quality and the feel of material, and Capricorn, which is all about how people see you. It just doesn't make any sense that she would put on the same exact clothes as the day before, right? So that's why we just woke up. No, you didn't just wake up because you're wearing the same clothes. And she's not here. They want to make really clear that she's not here. She's not here. She's not here. And she's, yeah. So some people say that there's stuff after the call. They hear her talking, but that's inconclusive. So then let's look at our ransom note here. It's pretty tough to see. I probably should have made it bigger for you. But a few things that are in this ransom note that are really interesting. She says, listen carefully. We are grouping, excuse me, let me start from scratch. Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. So what's interesting is, why would a kidnapper say, oh, we respect your business? Why? Well, if Patsy Ramsey is a Taurus rising and a Capricorn sun, what are her values? Money and power and status. So she's even saying in this ransom note, we respect your business. So she doesn't want to throw her husband's business under the bus when she's orchestrating this ruse, right? We also see here, what does she say? But not the country it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. So she wants to make really clear that whoever's writing this, we have your daughter in our possession, which is unnecessary. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. Now, right there is really, really interesting. These people have money. What kidnapper in their right mind is going to take the risk of kidnapping a child for 118 grand? Makes no sense. Why do that? Even with the Ramseys' money, they could have gotten way more than that. Why would you do that? Why would you put yourself in such danger for only $118,000? And meanwhile, if you're a kidnapper, aren't you going to be greedy? You're going to risk abducting a child for $118,000? Doesn't make any sense, right? Meanwhile, the $118,000 is very, very interesting because it was the same exact sum, or very close. I think there may have been some change attached to it, but that was the amount or thereabouts of John's bonus. It was $118,000 that year, I believe, and it was on paychecks throughout the house or pay stubs throughout the house. But it's interesting that $118,000 shows up in this. I think that this pertains to a few things. One, I think that because this was an orchestrated note, or a note that was meant to deceive, I think that one, they didn't want to have to take out $1 million out of their account in case the police asked them to do so, right? Also, she says the letters are written, it's not even a note, it's a letter, right? It's written to John. So we want you to take $118,000 out of your account. No, so it wasn't Patsy's account, right? So she's even protecting her own assets when she's saying that. Meanwhile, just by the way, this is a 2.5-page ransom note. This is very, very rare. It's probably the longest ransom note in the history of ransom notes, most likely. So what does that mean? It's like overcompensation, right? Number one, it makes no sense to need to write a 3-page ransom note. Why would you risk giving police that much of a sample of your handwriting? Unless you're really, really arrogant, right? Really arrogant. But more important, it has to do with overcompensation. I want to make sure they know that she's been kidnapped. So instead of writing a quick note, I'm going to wax on philosophic with this ransom note. And also, if you look at the writing, you can see this in multiple interviews that John and Patsy Ramsey wind up saying, well, there's a scale, and 1 means that you are not a match at all, and 5 means that you're a perfect match. And then they reverse it, and they say, well, 1 means that you're a perfect match, and 5 means that you're not a perfect match. And they keep mixing up the scale, putting no match at the beginning and putting no match at the end. And somebody got a 4.5 out of 5, which means that it is quite a match, or very close to being a match, right? And if you look at Patsy's handwriting, yeah, for sure. Not only that, but we're going to talk more about this ransom note for sure. Oh, thank you very much. Yes. Please mount the like for sure. But let's continue. So it's a 3-page ransom note, which makes no sense. So additionally, you will, as we said, you will draw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 will be in 20 bills. Make sure, this is really interesting. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. Seriously? Like, why would a kidnapper want them to bring an adequate size attaché to the bank? Why would they add this information? And how can they spell attaché but not spell business? Right? And the other word they misspelled. Yeah, there's other misspellings. It gets better. Make sure you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. Now that's interesting. So the note clearly says, we're going to contact you at 8 or 10 tomorrow, the next day. So when the police arrive, right, between 8 and 10 comes and goes. Nobody does anything. Nobody's like looking at the phone. Nobody announces. Patsy and John don't announce. Nobody called. Like, wouldn't you be around that phone, like obsessed on that phone call to get back your daughter, right? Yes, exactly. Someone who can't spell business. So she's trying to throw them off. Right. Now, listen to this. This is from a kidnapper, supposedly. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. What kind of kidnapper gives a hoot about whether or not the person bringing them the money is rested? Now, if you ask me, that line sounds very much something like a mother would say, right? She might say, you're going to have a busy day tomorrow. I advise you to go to bed early and get your sleep. Yeah, she says, the delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. Very strange. And it also has a very feminine touch, right? Can you imagine, like, what kind of mean man kidnapper is going to be concerned whether the guy bringing him money is well rested? Preposterous. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of the money, and hence, she says hence, which she also has said in her Christmas cards, when we go back, and hence, earlier, and then she crosses out delivery and writes pickup of your daughter. So obviously a kidnapper isn't going to be like, oh, I got the money, here's your daughter, nice doing business with you, right? So clearly this isn't a kidnapper. They're not going to make that mistake. Like, they're not going to deliver the daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The two gentlemen watching over your daughter, she writes, do, and then carrots, not particularly like you. So if you hate somebody so much that you're going to kidnap their little girl, you're probably not going to make that mistake of they really like you, right? You're going to know that you obviously really, really, really despise this man. You're not going to make the mistake that you may like or not like this person, right? The two gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Here we go. Listen to this. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. Listen to this, you stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions and you stand 100% chance of getting her back. And what does she do after she gets off this 911 call? Number one, she gets the note very, very clearly. You do this, she dies. You do that, she dies. Within 5 minutes of getting this note, she calls the police. Secondly, she has the whole world come over. She invites everybody over to comfort her, console her. So if she didn't want her daughter dead before this murder, well, clearly she might now, right? She's doing everything the opposite of what is being made clear to her. The person is really, really clear. You do this, she dies. Then you do this. Well, what does that mean? I mean, I would think that it's a good idea to call the police if your daughter gets kidnapped. Sure. But I also think that if very, very explicit instructions are given saying, if you do this, she dies, I think there's going to be some kind of deliberation there. Some kind of, well, what do we do? Do we handle this? Do you know what I mean? Really, really fascinating. I think so. Absolutely. Yep. But I don't think it was all the police. I think it was a faction, really. I think some were involved and others didn't know that they were involved, right? It was like the club within the club. Yeah. Hey, Carlin, nice to see you. Yes, exactly. It has a very, very strong feminine touch, 100%. So she also ends the note with, you and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. Can you ever imagine a man saying that? That sounds like something a woman would say, right? Don't try growing a brain, John. That sounds very much more like what a woman might say. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. It is up to you now, John. Victory. SBTC is how the note is signed off from. What could SBTC mean? Well, some say it would be saved by the cross, which again, it's very, very interesting. Yeah, a man wouldn't be so wordy, something that a wife would say. Absolutely, I agree. So also you got to remember that your beliefs create your reality. So if you believe and you give all your power to your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and I believe that if I devote my life to Jesus, I will be saved by the cross, that's going to become an apparency. If you really believe, and Patsy had a Taurus rising, that's grounded belief. That's grounded belief in terms of values, right? So very, very interesting. So it could be saved by the cross. I don't know what else it could be, but it would also explain if she does have that belief that she would be saved by the cross. Well, it worked. It worked. She's fine. What's interesting about the note is that sometimes there's the truth that we actually find in the lie, right? And in the note, she says at first, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals, obviously, that represent a small foreign faction. Now that's interesting, right? Because of that 9th house, which has to do with foreign affairs. Faction is a group or a clique within a larger group, party, government, organization, or the like, typically having different opinions and interests than the larger group. So I think this is relevant. So if there is stuff that's going on behind the scenes, I don't think it's all the clergy or everybody involved in the pageants or all the police, but a faction within those entities, right? So the truth is sometimes in the lie. It can be very, very clear. So here are my 2 working theories. I'm hoping you all can help me crack this case. John had been sexually abusing JonBenet and accidentally killed her. Patsy helped cover it up. That's theory 1. Theory 2, JonBenet seen, heard, said something that put John and some other hierarchy in jeopardy of being exposed. What say you? Do you like any of these theories? Do they ring true to you? Let me know. We'll talk all about it. We've got some other questions too to talk about in this case. And also, if you have any questions about the specific charts, like John's chart with his Virgo rising, be happy to answer them for you. Just saying, Virgo rising, when Mars in this chart, which rules actually the 7th house cusp of the other crime chart, when they actually found the body, is ruled by Mars because he had Scorpio on the 7th house cusp. You think they just snapped and killed her? I don't know. I find that really hard to believe. I would say that, just looking at Patsy's chart, Taurus rising, she's a natural mom doing the right thing. I'm not saying that Taurus risings can't get upset, but usually they're pretty controlled and do the right thing. Add to that Venus being the ruler of her chart. I think Patsy was a very caring, loving mother, actually. I just think that there were other reasons why she had to do this, right? There's no doubt in my mind that Patsy didn't really, really love JonBenet, but I feel like she didn't feel as if she had a choice, right? So that's interesting. My theory is if they were abusing her and maybe trafficking her to some of those faction elites you speak of and accidentally killed her, there was an investment is covering it all up, not just the parents. There was an investment in covering it all up, not just. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't understand much about trafficking. I don't know how that really works. But yeah, there's got to be some kind of investment in her in covering it up. Like what could have happened, right? I like a conspiracy theory. Thank you for sharing. I want to hear more. Do you have any other theories? Obviously, it could be many of these different things, but these are the 2 things. Like, I very much feel that this goes beyond the Ramseys, that something else is involved. But at the same time, John Ramsey is the ruler of that house. Who's the most powerful person in the Ramsey household? You got JonBenet, you got Burke, you got Patsy, you got John. John is the most powerful person in that household. So if anything was going on, he would know about it. In fact, he might be behind it, right? So we got to look there. It's really fascinating. So here are some other questions. Let's talk about this. Exactly. It doesn't make sense. The ransom note was to cover up the fact that they killed her and had the body. Remember, we have your daughter in our possession. They wanted that ransom note to make it look as if they did not have the body. It was taken from them. They didn't want to be caught with the body. So, question for you all. Why would a mother protect her husband had he abused and or killed her child? Why? Like, how could a mother do that? Like, what motivation? I mean, I don't think that money could push somebody to that. Image and money? That's very possible. That's very possible. But remember our chironic wound, right? In the 11th house, how this crime affects the masses. It's in Libra. And Libra, let me just see if I can bring her up again. So yeah, this is Patsy's chart. Okay, look at this chart. Number one, she's a Taurus rising, so she is more likely to follow the rules and do what it is that she thinks is the right thing. Remember, Tammy Wynette, stand by your man, Taurus. Meanwhile, she has all these planets in the 7th house, right? And also, I mean, she also has Chiron in her 10th house of status. So not only is she a Capricorn and does very much care about her image, but she has a woundedness around her image, right? And a woundedness around her father, in fact, with that 10th house Chiron. So if John Ramsey was abusing JonBenet, it's very, very possible that Patsy Ramsey would be covering it up because this is her context. That is what happens in families, and that is what she knows, right? Just like in terms of the pageants. Patsy got a lot of flack for putting her daughter in pageants, but you got to remember, Patsy's mother was in pageants. Patsy was in pageants. That is her context. That is how that's how the world works. You grow up, you get yourself in these pageants, and you try to become Miss West Virginia or whatever. That is your context, right? So it's weird for us to see, like, why are they dressing this girl up like a 30-year-old, which again is a little bit on the nose when we're looking at the big context of this case, what was happening. But JonBenet was dressed up to look a lot older than she was. But also, if she was sexually abused, which experts say she was also made to act much older than she was. But in terms of the pageant and all that, that's her context. Same thing if, the father does this to the daughters and the mothers protect them, that's her context. I think that if a mother is brought up in a home in which that is not going on, and the father is essentially doing the right thing, then that's not going to happen. So a lot of what we're talking about here is generational trauma in a lot of respects, pertaining to bystanders, right? Like with abuse, be it sexual or physical, usually there's somebody else somewhat around, right? Even if they're not witness to it, there's somebody that might be around. Sometimes they are witness to it, right? And sometimes in a lot of these instances, the mother is afraid also of the father, right? So it's very, very interesting. And it's a generational trauma, but it's also very, very global. It's very universal. So if this, and I hope it hasn't, but if it's such a dynamic, obviously on a lesser level, happened in your family, even if it didn't, it has happened in other families that are probably very, very close to you, right? Because this is the way things sort of go. So you're saying Patsy could have done that because of covered up John's murder, money, security, avoidance of changing her status quo to the best of her ability, and Capricorn. Yeah, she wanted to keep up appearances, shame. Very, very, very possible. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, she really went through great lengths. And again, you got to remember, Taurus is loyal. Patsy had a Taurus rising. They are very, very loyal. And she had that stellium. So there we have that. That makes sense. So I want to ask you about this. This is really interesting. So the DA cleared the Ramseys. Not only did they clear the Ramseys, but you got to remember too, the grand jury was like, yeah, indict them. And then the DA, even back then, didn't indict them. They didn't indict the Ramseys. Even though the grand jury voted to indict them, they didn't. Meanwhile, they have the DA apologize to the Ramsey based on touch DNA, which is hogwash, since the Ramsey's DNA would be there no matter what. And not to get too specific, but there was evidence that her lower parts had been wiped down. So my question to you is, and this would be really, really great, should the DA that cleared the Ramseys via touch DNA and had a public apology issued to them be thoroughly investigated? I think so, very much so. This should not go unnoticed. People should really dig. They really should, because it's just absolutely not fair that people in power would get away with murdering this little girl, or, you know, or anything. So yeah, what do you think? Do you agree with me? Should the DA that cleared the Ramseys and apologize to them, should they be thoroughly investigated? I think so. Yep. All the people that are involved around the Ramseys, friends, whoever was at that Christmas party, her pastor, Patsy's pastor, who was there that morning. Some even say that he was there before the 911 call was made, but that's not verifiable. So any entity needs to be investigated. Those pageants need to be investigated, whoever was running those pageants. The police and the DA's office need to be investigated. The clergy at the time of Patsy's church, they all need to be investigated according to this crime chart. Absolutely. Additionally, do you agree with me? Should the clergy at the time of the crime be thoroughly investigated? What about the pageantry? And the big question is, what I think it's very, very possible, there was a sex ring involved. I don't understand much about this, but I do think it's a very strong possibility. And I want to find out from you if you have any clues. If there was a sex ring involved, how could this evolve into JonBenet's death? I don't know. But I'm wondering, so if that is the case, that there was a sex ring involved, how does that result in JonBenet getting murdered? Why would they kill her? Is it because she was going to tell people? Did she see something? What's going on here? Well, in any case, feel free to comment on that. John Ramsey recently did an interview with Megyn Kelly, and Megyn Kelly was extremely disappointing in this interview. And you probably know how I feel about Megyn Kelly, but she didn't press him on certain things at all. But the good news is he seems to be getting older and he's ailing. And if he's as arrogant as I think that he is, he's going to continue doing these interviews. And in one of these interviews, because he's ailing, he's going to trip up. So unless he has good friends and lawyers around him that say, don't do any interviews, then we're going to see further understanding of his place involved in this crime, what he may have done, what he may have known. Even the latest Megyn Kelly interview is eye-opening, especially the contradictions. But you know, arrogant people, you got to remember, this guy was in the military. He was a pilot. He was a very high-powered CEO, which means that he is steely, does not crack. And he also knows how to tie knots if he was in the military, right? So just food for thought in regard to that, for sure. So keep an eye out on what's going on in this case. I think sometimes people want to really, really push. John Ramsey, for instance, did push to retest the DNA. He really pushed for it, right? Why did he really push for it? Well, if they found his DNA, then it's completely explainable. And if they didn't, which again, he could have had somebody working in the Boulder Crime Lab or something like that. But chances are he's going to do other interviews. You know, he's a Virgo rising. might not be able to leave well enough alone if he was involved, etc. So keep an eye out, see if you see anything interesting. It would be quite interesting if later on down the line with interviews and whatnot, if he implicates himself. That would be interesting. You think that should be investigated and will be investigated are two different things. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So this is a very, very tragic case. There's a lot that is going on here. I think if you look at the evidence, you'll find it really, really clear that this took place inside the Ramsey household. Something happened in that house. Why? When we're looking at why, it's the two big things that I'm seeing is it could be very, very contained to that family environment, meaning it pertains to domestic abuse and familial abuse. But a lot of the aspects in the crime chart do point to something larger and bigger. So I'm not quite sure what it could be. But I think that they should interview, number one, I think that they should do a thorough investigation of that DA, the two DAs. I think there were two. The one that didn't indict them after the grand jury said that they should, and the DA especially, who issued an apology. That person needs to be thoroughly investigated. They could have been blackmailed. They could have been in on things, etc. The pageantry around that time should be interviewed, thoroughly investigated. Also, the clergy, Patsy's pastor is now dead, but people should be interviewed to see what was going on. All of John's friends, birds of a feather, flock together. So if he was involved in his daughter's death and also stuff that goes beyond the Ramsey household, i.e. a sex ring, which is very, very possible, or some have suggested that it could actually be child pornography, right? A child pornography sex ring. So other people are most likely involved. This is not just isolated. So all of Ramsey's friends, who was ever at that Christmas party, all of the men need to be involved. Because again, when we look at that North Node, it's right next to Mars. It has to do with men. So yeah, a lot of things. But I appreciate you all joining me today, especially on the live stream. And if you're catching this later, well, I'd love to hear your comments too. And feel free to comment all about this case. I think it's very, very fascinating. And I do hope that she gets justice. So enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. And I shall see you next crime for sure.